The most expensive warship ever built, a $13 billion nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, flanked by Aegis destroyers carrying some of the most advanced air defense systems on the planet. Together, this strike group represents more raw firepower than most nations possess in their entire military, and it just sailed into a waterway barely 21 nautical miles wide, where the coastline on both sides belongs to a country that has spent 40 years preparing for exactly this moment. According to multiple defense sources, as the carrier group entered the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a swarm of 47 drones directly toward the fleet. The U.S. intercepted them, every single one. And yet, inside the Pentagon, the reaction wasn't relief, it was concern. Because what happened in those waters didn't prove American dominance. It exposed something far more uncomfortable, a vulnerability that no amount of firepower can easily fix. A math problem that tilts further against the U.S. Navy with every encounter, and a question that defense strategists have been asking behind closed doors for years. What happens when the world's most powerful fleet enters a space where geography, cost, and doctrine all favor the other side? If you're interested in military strategy, global power shifts, and the technologies reshaping modern warfare, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. To understand why this encounter alarmed analysts more than it reassured them, you have to understand the water itself. The Strait of Hormuz is not open ocean. It is a geographic bottleneck, roughly 21 nautical miles across at its narrowest point, with navigable shipping lanes compressed to approximately 2 miles in each direction. On a normal day, roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through this corridor. On a day when a carrier strike group transits, the corridor becomes something else entirely. A kill zone, designed by nature and fortified by Iran over 4 decades. Iran controls the northern coastline. It controls Abu Musa and the Tumb Islands, which sit directly in the transit path. Along the shore and embedded into the terrain are anti-ship cruise missile batteries, surveillance radar installations, fast boat pens hidden inside coves, and drone launch sites, all pre-positioned, all rehearsed, all oriented toward one scenario. A carrier strike group normally operates with significant spacing between its ships, destroyers positioned miles out from the carrier, creating overlapping defensive bubbles across wide areas of ocean. In Hormuz, that spacing collapses, the formation tightens, reaction windows shrink. The layered defense architecture that makes a carrier group so formidable in the Pacific or the Atlantic starts to compress into something far less comfortable. The open ocean is where a carrier dominates. A choke point is where a carrier becomes constrained. So why did the United States send one through at all? Carrier transits through Hormuz are not unusual. The U.S. Navy has conducted them routinely for decades, and they serve a clear strategic purpose, demonstrating freedom of navigation, reassuring Gulf allies, and projecting American resolve. But context changes everything. During periods of heightened tension, a routine transit becomes a deliberate message. Reports indicate that this transit was ordered against a backdrop of escalating friction, Iranian seizures of commercial vessels, expanded IRGC naval activity, and diplomatic channels that had gone quiet. The carrier's presence was intended to signal strength, but not everyone in Washington agreed it was the right call. Senior Navy officers have privately voiced concern about pushing high-value assets into confined waters during periods of active confrontation. Former CENTCOM planners have debated the fundamental trade-off, whether a Hormuz transit in a crisis generates more deterrence than it does exposure. The political logic is straightforward. You don't back down, you don't let adversaries believe the strait is theirs to close. The tactical reality is more complicated. A $13 billion carrier in a 2-mile wide shipping lane is the most valuable target in the most constrained environment, at the most dangerous possible time. Iran was watching, and their response was faster than most expected. According to defense reports and open-source intelligence analysis, the IRGC launched a swarm of 47 drones toward the carrier strike group as it transited the strait. The composition of the swarm appears to have been deliberately mixed. Based on known IRGC inventory, analysts believe the wave likely included Shahed series one-way attack drones, Mohajer 6 platforms capable of both surveillance and strike, and Ababil series units designed for coordinated swarm operations. This composition matters because it was almost certainly intentional. Some of those drones may have been unarmed reconnaissance platforms. Others were reportedly armed. And that ambiguity is the entire point. Iran's drone doctrine doesn't depend on every unit reaching its target. It depends on forcing the defender to treat every single contact as a lethal threat. When 47 objects appear on radar, low, slow, scattered across multiple approach vectors, the defending fleet cannot afford to assume any of them are harmless. Every drone must be classified, tracked, and engaged. The IRGC understands American engagement protocols. They know that uncertainty is itself a weapon, because every drone that forces the US to fire a multi-million-dollar interceptor is a strategic success, whether it carries a warhead or not. The fleet's response was fast, but what it took to stop those 47 drones tells a much more complicated story. The Aegis combat system performed exactly as designed. Spy-1 radar arrays aboard the escorting destroyers detected the incoming swarm, classified the threats, and began sequencing engagements across the formation. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft launched from the carrier's flight deck, moving to establish standoff jamming, disrupting GPS navigation signals, and severing command and control data links between the drones and their operators. Reports suggest that electronic warfare neutralized a meaningful portion of the swarm before kinetic engagement was necessary, causing some drones to lose navigation, deviate from course, or crash. But not all of them. The remaining threats were engaged with SM-2 and ESSM missiles at medium range, and those that penetrated closer were met by CIWS Phalanx point defense systems, radar-guided Gatling guns designed as the last barrier before impact. Every drone was stopped. No ship was struck. By every operational metric, the defense worked. But defense analysts who study fleet engagements note a critical distinction. The system was stressed in ways that peacetime exercises rarely replicate. The target density, the confined operating environment, the simultaneous commercial shipping traffic, the ambiguity between armed and unarmed contacts, all of it compressed decision-making timelines and forced the fleet to expend resources at a rate that raises a far more difficult question. Every drone was destroyed. So why are analysts worried? If this changes how you think about modern naval defense, hit like and stay with me, because the real problem isn't what just happened. It's what comes next. Here's the equation that keeps defense planners awake. 47 drones, priced between $20,000 and $50,000 each, represent a total Iranian investment of under $2.5 million. The interceptors used to destroy them, SM-2s at roughly $2.5 million per round, SM-6s at up to $4.3 million, ESSMs at over $1 million each, represent a potential expenditure of $50 to $150 million in a single engagement. That ratio is not sustainable, and the cost disparity is only half the problem. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries approximately 96 vertical launch cells. Those cells are shared between offensive Tomahawk cruise missiles, multiple variants of defensive interceptors, and in some configurations, anti-submarine rockets. A single swarm engagement on the scale reported could consume 20 to 40% of a destroyer's total defensive loadout. Rearming those cells at sea is slow, logistically demanding, and, in a contested environment, extremely dangerous. The Navy's capability to reload vertical launch systems during underway replenishment is still in development. It is not yet an operational reality at scale. This means Iran does not need to sink a carrier. It does not need a single drone to reach its target. It needs to force the fleet to empty its magazines, and then escalate. Defense commentators have called this the Walmart versus Tiffany's problem. Iran manufactures in bulk at minimal cost. The US defends with precision-guided interceptors that take years to produce and millions to procure. In a prolonged confrontation, the math favors the side spending less. And drones are not even Iran's most dangerous capability in these waters. What makes the Strait of Hormuz so dangerous is not any single Iranian weapon system. It is the layered architecture the IRGC has built over decades, designed so that drones are merely the first phase. Behind the drone swarm sits a second layer, hundreds of fast attack craft operated by the IRGC Navy, armed with anti-ship missiles and torpedoes, capable of surging from hidden coves and island bases in coordinated waves. Behind that, A third layer, land-based anti-ship cruise missiles, including the Noor, Qatar, and the Khalij Fars anti-ship ballistic missile, pre-positioned in hardened, dispersed launchers along the coastline. A fourth layer consists of naval mines. Iran is estimated to possess thousands, and the strait has been mined before, during the Iran-Iraq War. Mine clearance in contested waters under fire is among the slowest and most hazardous operations any navy can undertake. And a fifth layer, Iran's Kilo-class submarines, operating in the shallow, acoustically cluttered waters of the Persian Gulf, where detection is significantly harder than in deep ocean. Pentagon war games have repeatedly surfaced the same nightmare scenario, a simultaneous coordinated attack using all 5 layers at once. Drones saturate the air defenses, fast boats close from multiple vectors, cruise missiles launch from the coastline, mines restrict maneuver, submarines target the highest value ships. No single layer is designed to succeed alone. Together, they are designed to overwhelm. Comment below, do you think the Carrier Strike Group is still the right tool for this kind of mission? And if not, what replaces it? This is not the first time the United States and Iran have clashed in these waters. On April 18, 1988, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Praying Mantis, the largest American naval surface engagement since the Second World War. In a single day, the U.S. destroyed 2 Iranian frigates, sank a gunboat, and neutralized multiple armed oil platforms. Iran's conventional naval capability was gutted. The battle lasted hours. The outcome was total. And it reshaped everything that followed, not in the way Washington expected. The IRGC absorbed the lesson of 1988 completely. The lesson was not that Iran was weak. The lesson was that fighting the U.S. Navy symmetrically, ship against ship, fleet against fleet, was suicide. In the years that followed, the IRGC constructed an entirely separate naval force, distinct from Iran's regular navy, built from the ground up around a different philosophy: speed over size, mass over quality, concealment over confrontation, expendability over preservation. Every fast boat, every coastal missile launcher, every drone in the IRGC's inventory exists because of what happened in 1988. Analysts who compare today's tensions to that engagement and expect a similar outcome are missing the structural shift. Iran rebuilt its entire maritime doctrine specifically to ensure that 1988 never happens the same way again. The platforms are cheaper, more numerous, harder to detect, and designed to be lost in large numbers without crippling the force. The last time the US and Iran fought at sea, America won in a single afternoon. That victory is precisely why the next confrontation would look nothing like it. This encounter in Hormuz feeds a debate that has been intensifying inside the Pentagon for over a decade, one that extends far beyond Iran. The core question is whether the aircraft carrier, the centerpiece of American naval power since 1945, is becoming a liability in contested waters rather than an asset. The same cost asymmetry that Iran exploits in Hormuz applies in the Taiwan Strait, where China's DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles create a denial zone stretching hundreds of miles from the Chinese coastline. It applies in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Baltic, the Black Sea, anywhere a near-peer or regional adversary has invested in precision-guided saturation attack capabilities. Some defense strategists argue that the carrier's era of unchallenged power projection is not ending because carriers are weak, but because the cost to threaten them has dropped to a fraction of the cost to defend them. The economics of naval warfare are inverting. The counter-argument is real and substantial. No other platform delivers what a carrier delivers: organic air power, command and control infrastructure, logistical depth, and political signaling that nothing else in any nation's inventory can replicate. A carrier off your coast means something that a submarine or a drone swarm simply does not. But the emerging strategic response within the Navy suggests that even carrier advocates recognize the shift. Distributed maritime operations, unmanned surface vessels, collaborative combat aircraft, standoff precision strike from greater range. The goal is not to retire the carrier. It is to stop depending on it as the single irreplaceable node around which everything else orbits. Because a single irreplaceable node is, by definition, a single point of failure. 47 drones were launched, 47 drones were destroyed. On the surface, it looks like a clean win. Underneath, it reveals a trajectory that bends against the defender. The next swarm will not be 47. It may be 200, launched simultaneously with cruise missiles from the coastline, fast boats from hidden positions, and mines already laid in the transit corridor. Iran does not need a technological breakthrough to change the equation. It needs volume, coordination, and the willingness to absorb losses that cost almost nothing to replace. The Strait of Hormuz remains the single most dangerous flashpoint for a direct US-Iran military confrontation, and neither side has an incentive to back down. The carrier remains the most visible symbol of American global power, but symbols become targets, and the cost of defending them is rising while the cost of threatening them falls. The next few years will determine whether the US Navy adapts fast enough, investing in directed energy weapons that can defeat drones at pennies per shot, fielding autonomous countermeasures that don't drain the missile magazine, and distributing its combat power so that no single ship's loss can cripple the fleet. Or whether adversaries, in Tehran, in Beijing, and elsewhere, find the answer to a force that has dominated the world's oceans for 80 years. The age of unchallenged naval supremacy may not end with a single decisive battle. It may end with a swarm. If you want more deep analysis on military power and global strategy, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your perspective in the comments. The next one goes deeper.